Thank you very much for coming out on this wonderful Tuesday night. I'm Pat Miller. I'm Director of Education for Waterford Wine and Spirits. Usually we do these on Thursdays. We do wine seminars every Thursday. We've got the vintage champagne coming up this Thursday, which is going to be a lot of fun. We still have a couple seats left for that. We do those through November, and then in December, we take December off, but we'll be starting them again in January. But in addition to those wine seminars, which Waterford has been doing for almost 20 years now, we started 20 years ago in Milwaukee in a shop about the size of this tasting area on Brady Street. We now have a shop in Delafield and a wine bar, a shop up in the Green Bay area, and then this was our fourth location, opened about 2.5 years ago here. We did a big renovation last year. We created a little more formal seminar space here, and it's been a great ride since then. So thank you all for joining us tonight. In addition to those wine seminars, we've started doing more and more. We've done some beer master classes. We've done 3 with some local breweries. We had Jessica Jones from Giant Jones here a couple weeks ago. We had Grant from Working Draft here a month before that. Those have been a lot of fun. We'll be starting those up again at the start of the new year. This is our very first whiskey master class that we've done, though, so thank you all for joining us for that. And we're incredibly thrilled to have Josie Henry here from J. Henry, who is now a master blender, or master blender? Okay, and which is a big deal, and he probably won't tell you it's a big deal, so I'll tell you it's a big deal. He can talk a little bit about what goes into that if he wants to, but we are incredibly proud to have him working in Wisconsin, and we're incredibly pleased to have him here tonight. Before we get to the fun drinking, I'm going to give you the boring logistics of the evening, but I promise I won't take too long. So tonight, we're going to be doing some comparison tasting. Your welcome flight that you have is at that top row on your sheet. We're going to be working down sort of row by row as we do the pours. The second flight is a little bit complicated because we're actually tasting 3 things, and I'll be bringing around some wine glasses with the Calvados in it. But mainly, this idea kind of came to us this spring when Joe stopped in to kind of tell us some of the fun things that he was working on, and sort of gave us a preview of the Calvados finish at that point, or at least let us know that it was happening. And we started talking about this idea of, and I know you were saying, it's kind of sometimes hard to sell these barrel finishes because people don't really know necessarily what Calvados is or what Tokaji is. Cognac and Argmanac people have a good sense of, or at least kind of know. I think it's kind of like brandy, which it is. But in terms of some of these other finishes, they're kind of a mystery to folks. So we thought it would be really fun to do a pairing that takes the finished whiskey and then puts them alongside the spirit of the barrel that it was finished in, so we can kind of see what influence it takes from that particular spirit. I think this is the first time I've done this. I think it might be the first time you've done this. Yeah. So I'm very excited, and I'm very glad that you're all here to share it with us. So yeah, we'll go through from the top down. We will be kind of tasting back and forth between things. The water that's on your table, you shouldn't really need to rinse out your glass too much between flights. You're welcome to if you'd like, but that's primarily for hydration. And then the slate gray or the dark gray cup, that's a spit cup or dump bucket. Those don't get used a whole lot at our wine seminars, but we are doing 10 spirits tonight. I think 11 spirits tonight, so spitting may not be the worst idea, but hey, it's your choice on that. But yeah, any questions on the boring logistics of the evening? All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe and take it away.
Thanks, man. Thank you all for coming. This is kind of exciting because, like Pat said, this is the first time that we've done really kind of a side-by-side comparison of a lot of these spirits with their finishing counterparts. So hopefully this is educational. If you do have any questions, please just raise your hand. I'm happy to stop what I'm doing. Fortunately, Pat already poured some samples for everyone. Usually I take like 15 minutes to get to the first taste. So we're gonna start right away on our left with our Patent Road Reserve. And while we all enjoy that, I'll talk a little bit about the background of J. Henry and then I'll jump into our Reserva Sevillana Vino Naranjo finished rye. So this is named after Patton Road, which is the road that our farm is on, ironically enough. I know, we're pretty creative. So we're a third generation farming family. My grandfather bought the property that we're currently still on Patton Road, just north of Madison, about 30 minutes. Took me 35 minutes to get here, exactly. So we primarily grow hybrid seed corn. So what that is we're actually a custom grower for other farmers throughout the Midwest, North, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. We actually talk to them about their specific growing conditions, soil type, climate, what kind of animals they're gonna feed it to, because dairy cattle really need a different food source than like goats, for example. And we take all this information into account based off of what they tell us, and then we try and grow a custom hybrid that will yield the best and accomplish their goals as a farmer when it comes to growing high quality corn. So the way that we do this is we look at all these different varietal kind of traits that they're looking for, and then there's thousands, if not millions, of different varietals of corn throughout the world. And so we will actually kind of look through all these different traits that they are looking for, look through all the kind of favorable traits that are on the market, and then custom grow a hybrid for that farmer that ideally will accomplish all of their goals in agriculture. The way that we do this is because corn is a very unique plant. It has both male and female parts on every single corn stalk. So what that means is you can actually cross-pollinate them very, very easily in a field. So the way that we do this is we take one set of favorable traits A, we call that our male row. We call one set of favorable traits B, we'll use that as our female row. And we actually grow them side by side in the same field. So we have one male row for every 4 female plants. This is how we're kind of starting this cross-pollination. In like July, after we get through kind of the planting season, we'll actually come through and detassel all of the female plants. So we'll go through and cut, the tassel is the male part that throws pollen around. We'll actually go through and cut all those tassels off of every single male plant in the field. And then allow the male plant to pollinate the female plant. We'll destroy the male rows and then harvest the resulting AB cross from that female cross-pollination. So we only end up harvesting about 80% of every field that we grow seed corn on. So this is very, very labor intensive. If anybody has grown up in the Midwest and has had to detassel corn before, everybody says it's like the worst job that you could possibly do. I won't disagree with you. As a young kid, I had to do that as well, and I'm glad to be making whiskey now. So after we do this, we have this resulting AB cross that hits all the favorable genetic traits that that specific farmer is looking for. So what we really tried to do when we started J. Henry was use a lot of our background knowledge in agriculture to create high quality inputs for making whiskey. So 95, if not more, % of the world's whiskey supply is still made primarily in like 3 different counties in Kentucky and the surrounding 50 to 100 miles from that. So I'm not saying this to bash Kentucky whiskey because they make a lot of fine products. I've learned a lot from those distillers, and they still have been doing this to the highest quality for several, if not hundreds of years for some of these distilleries. The reason I am bringing this up is because what we are really trying to do with J. Henry is create a terroir-driven approach to whiskey, where that concept has not really spread outside until recently, probably within the last 15 or 20 years. It's definitely been a concept that Pat will talk to you about on the wine side. It's pretty much been the precedent for any New World wine grown outside of like Europe and Mesopotamia and those sort of things. So terroir is a French term. It essentially means from the land or from the environment. So the concept here is that a grape varietal that is genetically identical, grown in two different parts of the world, will take on a different flavor based off of its environment. So a Malbec grape grown in the south of France is going to taste wildly different than that genetically identical grape grown at high altitude in the Andes mountain range of Argentina or Chile. Exactly the same identical genetics grown in two different regions will take on an extremely different flavor profile. So, you know, Sauvignon Blanc has become really popular in Australia and New Zealand. That flavor profile is going to be a lot different than like a traditional French or Italian Sauvignon Blanc. So why I'm bringing this up is because all of this whiskey that has primarily been made, bourbon specifically, in the same region, you know, kind of like the Bourbon Triangle, for lack of a better term, Lexington, Louisville, and Bardstown, that still creates 95, if not more, % of the world's bourbon supply. They use a lot of the same varietals of corn because number 2 yellow dead corn is extremely high in starch, which means it will distill a lot more efficiently. I don't need to get into the whole science with all that unless people are interested, but we got a lot of whiskey to drink, and I think that's what everybody really came to do. So we wanted to create something that was truly highlighting the agriculture of South Central Wisconsin, had some ties to our family, and really kind of focus on how we can create a terroir flavor profile that is of the same level of quality as these massive distilleries, but has its own unique flavor profile from our farm and from the terroir of our region. So there's actually a bottle up there. I can't reach it because of the TV.
Oh, the TV, I can move the TV,
Oh,
yeah. I get to pretend to be tall, this is
All right.
amazing, we'll see how it goes.
So while Pat's grabbing this bottle, so we actually, we decided to use different varietals of corn, wheat, and rye that were all from Wisconsin. So the corn that we use that he's gonna pass around in a moment is called W335A. This was a red heirloom varietal developed in 1939 by UW-Madison's Ag Research Department, only about 30 miles from our farm in Dane, Wisconsin. So we started growing this hybrid, selling it to local dairy farmers because it was a more nutritious varietal at the time. In 1946, when my grandfather purchased our property. We grew that hybrid for roughly 30-40 years until GMO crops kind of pushed all these heirloom varietals completely out of commercial agricultural production, primarily because they take a lot more work and they don't yield as much in the same amount of acreage. So W335A, for example, yields about 75, maybe 80 bushels per acre. A bushel of corn is 56 pounds. I'm not really sure why that is. I think Americans will use anything but the metric system to just measure stuff out. So a bushel of soybeans is only 52 pounds. Once again, I don't really know why. I don't know why we can't just measure things in liters. So W335A yields only 70 to 80 bushels per acre. Number 2 yellow dead corn, which most people are using in commercial ag, not only for ethanol production, but also for major distilling use, yields about 250 bushels per acre. So no farmer in their right mind would be growing something, regardless of how much more nutritional value this has per kernel. When you get 5 times the volume in the same acreage, it would be foolish of you as a farmer to grow something like this. So W335A kind of fell out of commercial production in the late 70s, early 80s. Nobody was really growing it for commercial industry at that time. It would have gone extinct, but University of Wisconsin actually held a seed sample because it was one of their proprietary research hybrids that they developed. So they held about 1,200 and some kernels in a hibernation pod, essentially, in like the basement of the ag department downtown on campus. So there is a temperature and humidity controlled vault underneath the ag department where they hold thousands of different varietals of seed that they've produced over the years as an ag research university. So they primarily hold these for research purposes, or if some crazy farmer like my dad wants to go on this venture to create Wisconsin bourbon. So luckily they loaned us these kernels when we told them our idea of creating terroir whiskey here in south central Wisconsin. They loaned us those 1,200 kernels in 2006. From 2006 to 2009, we repropagated that into turning it into about 100 acres. We did have to return that after the first year because if we screwed it up, it would have been stealing property of the state or something like that. So luckily the project worked. We repropagated that from 1,200 kernels over the course of 3 full years. And then in 2009, with about 100 acres of W335A available, also using heirloom varietal of Glacier Winter Wheat from the UW Ag Department and Spooner Rye from Spooner, Wisconsin, which is a research facility just south of Eau Claire, also from a UW-Madison satellite kind of office. So with those 3 grains being grown on our farm just north of Madison, we finally started distilling in 2009 up at 45th Parallel in New Richmond, Wisconsin. Distilleries are really expensive and we were just farmers trying something out. So that's why we contract distill up there, and we still contract distill with them today. They do a fantastic job. We're essentially just renting their equipment at this point. And financially that made us a little bit more lean and aggressive, and then we didn't have to make gin, we didn't have to make vodka, and we could wait and continue building inventory for 5 full years until we released our first product in February of 2015. So that was our small batch bourbon. That's our flagship product. Pat was like, we don't even need to try that. You guys are all professionals.
That's right.
You can get that at pretty much any bar throughout the area. So we jumped right into the good stuff, so to say. Hopefully it's all good, but this product that we have on our left, what everybody should be trying right now or finishing, hopefully, because I know we have a lot to catch up on, is single barrel cask strength bourbon. So our Patton Road Reserve, always a single barrel cask strength. So while we compare this, even though we're not tasting it, to our small batch, these are extremely fun for me because each individual barrel tastes extremely unique. There's nuance, there's subtleties. Each one of these barrels has its own kind of personality, if you will. And the best part of my job as our master blender is finding and highlighting the personalities of each one of these casks. So Pat and I actually did that. We tasted through about 4 or 5 different barrels, and we found this one to be the best personality that fit this store. So that's the private barrel pick for Pat and his team here.
Out of curiosity, what name would you have given it?
I don't think this one had a name because some of them. So his question was, what name would it have been? I'd have to double check on the number. I'll have to look at my notes.
Yeah.
But with some of our single barrels, I started naming them based off of the personality. So like Whopper Texas Ranger was a really fun one for me.
Chocolate
Bacon
rain.
Donut, yeah, Chocolate Rain. See, we do have some fans. Sometimes when I can't even think of a name, I just put them in kind of like that upper echelon where they're going to have to be a private selection. But I'll double check. Back up my notes.
Yeah, and the 5 or 6 that we tasted, all very different, and I was very surprised, sort of the variety and the nuance in there. I've done a number of barrel picks, but I think this was kind of the most in-depth in terms of notes, and Joe was very enthusiastic about getting everyone who was tasting with us sort of their notes on it, because I think it's part of your process for figuring out kind of what barrels end up doing what. That's kind of was my sense of it.
Yeah, totally. So as you'll notice with everything that we tried today, we only have one mash bill. So I want everybody to kind of keep that in mind, because when you're making and talking about what a final product is going to taste like, when you're talking about really any aged spirit, but specifically bourbon, there's 4 or 5 major components that make up that final flavor profile. So the mash bill, the fermentation and the yeast strain, the distillation process and what kind of equipment you use, and then maturation, and you can kind of put proofing and blending along with maturation. I kind of loop those together because that's more of like, there's a French term. Nancy Fraley, my mentor, who's kind of a genius in the whiskey industry, she was trained by an 11th generation Cognac distiller. So that's why I'm referencing a lot of these kind of ancient French Cognac Armagnac blending techniques, because they've been doing, I visited a Cognac distillery a couple years ago that has had a family member in production since 1127. So like they're going on close to 1,000 years of producing the same product and elevating that. Whereas we talk about our country's not even, 300 years old yet. So essentially what this process called élevage, which is to rear or to raise in French, is the entire process of taking distilled spirit, putting it into a barrel, and then raising it up like a child until it gets bottled. So the entire élevage process is, how do you treat your casks? Where do they live in the rickhouse? How do you manage them? Then after that, you kind of blend them all together to create a final product. So when you think about this final product and how this is all going to come from these different aspects, like 15 to 20% comes from the mash bill. So our mash bill is 64% red heirloom corn, 14 wheat, 14 rye, 8 malted barley. So the exact same mash bill for all of our bourbons. The rye mash bill just flips in versus the rye and the corn content. So keep that in mind as we're tasting all these things, because a lot of bigger distilleries will have different mash bills that will kind of lead to different product diversions. If you look at kind of like a product or a SKU tree, we just have 1 and 1, which I think is really, really unique about the climate and the maturation conditions we have in Wisconsin, because we're able to create, and to Pat's point, so many divergent flavor profiles because of the extreme temperatures we have here. So 20% comes from the grains. Really only 5 to 10% will come from the fermentation and the yeast strain that you pick. You're taking those grains, you're mashing them down, you're adding yeast, you're adding an enzyme like malted barley to convert your starches into sugars. Your yeast eats your sugars and creates alcohol. Then you take your beer after the yeast is kind of finished consuming and creating your alcohol. Distillation is another like 10% of the final flavor, because really all you're doing, and I'm simplifying this a lot, like all these processes are a lot more complicated than just like, oh yeah, you just throw it in a bucket. So distilling, all you're really doing conceptually, not in practice, is you are distilling something out to increase the potency of what's left. So in the case of hard alcohol, we're distilling out water to increase the potency of the alcohol that remains. Obviously, there's a lot of chemistry involved with this. There's a lot of creation of new gases, liquids, esters, that sort of thing. But conceptually, if you think about it, all you're really doing is concentrating what was already in solution. It's a very simplified way of looking at it. Most distillers, whiskey makers, cognac makers will pretty much agree that 50 to 60% of the final flavor of any aged spirit is going to come from the interaction of that spirit and the specific type of cask that it's in. So when we were starting J. Henry, we focused on the grains and we focused on the maturation conditions in our barrels, because in our head, okay, well, if we don't own our own equipment, but we have complete control over 80%, if not more, of the final product, that's arguably more important for us. So that's kind of how we landed on this. And as we're trying all these different products, just kind of keep that in mind, the variety that we're able to work with these cask finishes, with the products, because to Pat's point, what I'm trying to do is not pigeonhole different barrels into different flavor categories, but allow them and their personalities to kind of like be really good at what they're already doing. I mean, if you have kids, I'm sure you don't have favorite kids if you have more than one. Barrels are kind of like children to me. You want them to be really good at what they want to be really good at. You don't want to force, your son that's really good at soccer to play football just because you played football. Like, that's not gonna work very well. Typically, it doesn't make sense. Instead, like, why not let that élevage process go in the direction that it's already going? So this will become pretty apparent, I think, as we go through this. Does anybody have any questions up until now?
What was the proof on that patent road?
59.1.
Yeah,
59.1.
just about 120. So just to say a little bit about the rye, and so Vinde Naranja is a fairly obscure fortified Spanish, sort of like a cross between a fortified wine and a liqueur almost. So Vinde Naranja literally translates as wine from oranges or orange wine, which is very different than like the natural wine, orange wine, that just means you keep the grapes in contact with the skins. So it's like a white grape made like a red wine. That's a whole other thing. There's no oranges involved with that at all. But this particular wine from Spain does actually have like orange pith involved, and there's actual oranges involved in the production. It's also incredibly hard to find. So I beat the bushes. It is not currently distributed in Wisconsin, so we didn't have a good example to pair with it. But it's a fun one. I thought it was a good example of sort of, we can talk about bourbon and rye and kind of, you can do that, and then you also have unfinished and then finished for the first flight. But we are working on getting some Vinde Naranja in the state. We're talking with some importers about it.
Oh,
so
great.
we're
I could only ever get stuff shipped directly from Spain, or there's one store that was going to charge me 300% of what it was actually worth, like in New York.
Yeah.
So this is, to Pat's point, it's a very, very rare thing. I remember tasting this. So I studied abroad in Spain for a year in college, and I was very fortunate to live with a host mom that enjoyed food almost as much as I do. And she didn't enjoy drinking as much as I did, but she introduced me to this Vino Naranja, which, translates exactly to orange wine. But this is made in a much more kind of traditional way. It's from the sherry region. The actual full nomenclature for this wine is Vino Naranja del Condado de la Huelva. So it's a very small kind of like denominación, that's another French term, but region of production inside kind of the Jerez sherry region in the southwest corner of Spain, really close to Portugal. So this comes from like a sherry backbone. What they do is they take kind of like a fino or a semi-sweet sherry, create that wine. On the side, they've actually distilled some of this sherry into high-proof brandy, which they'll pour sugar and macerated orange peels into like these big glass carboys, and essentially just bottle condition that out in the hot Spanish sun for like 2 or 3 years. So yeah, they just essentially condense this, cook it, cook it under the sun until it's become like a syrup almost. Then they'll fortify their sherry wine with a bunch of this, I forget what that is actually called, but that fortifying liquid they'll actually fortify the wine with, and then age it in a Solera system, which is a pyramid of barrels that are all interconnected, so they kind of all age together, if you will. They'll age that Solera system for another 10 to 15 years before they have Vino Naranja, which comes out tasting like this beautiful chocolate orange kind of dessert wine. I'm really excited to hear that you're able to find some.
Yeah, we're working on it, so yeah, it is a lot of fun.
So when our first rye came out about 2 or 3 years ago, our rye mash bill is really unique because it has a lot of citrus and apple and kind of pear. It's a lot fruitier than like your traditional 95 or 100% rye. And we did that intentionally because we wanted this to be a little bit more depth, a little bit more complexity, also a little bit more approachable for people that are getting into the category. So it has enough spice that like a seasoned hardcore rye drinker will find enjoyable, but it also has enough kind of sweetness, nuance, and approachability that somebody getting into the category will find enjoyable. But immediately when I tried that rye, for some reason, and I know scent and taste are very tied to memory, for some reason when I tried this, I was transported back to like my host mom's house in Spain, like drinking this Vino Naranja, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be our first finished rye with that product because I could already see the flavor similarities kind of happening with our first rye. So hopefully that turned out all right.
Sure did.
Any questions on the first flight? Because we're going to come around and pour the second momentarily.
What's the age on that rye?
It's a 5-year-old rye, and then in those Vino Naranja casks for, I think this one was about 12 or 13 months.
And the second question is, in the rick house, are you keeping the barrels in the same place the whole time, or do you move them around?
We try to keep them in the same place. That's gotten a little more challenging as we've kind of expanded and grown. So we started with one rick house that held about 700-800 barrels when it was totally jam-packed full. That's just an old dairy barn that's on our farm right now that we weren't really doing anything with when we started this in 2009. So we just kind of cleaned all the trash out and started throwing barrels in there. We very quickly outgrew that in 2015 when we realized people actually liked what we were making. And we had to, distilled spirits, especially whiskey, you all know this, you can't just make more overnight. It's a 5 to 8 year process. For us, it was an idea in 2005. We didn't even start selling a product until 2015. So 3-4 years of research and just repropagating the corn, 5-6 years of aging product, and finally we were able to sell something. So we expanded in 2018 to a slightly larger building that hold about 3,500 barrels. We shortly outgrew that as well, which is awesome. Now we have a third rick house that's more of like a customized Kentucky style building with an actual racking system. Before we were just putting everything on forklifts and the racks, trying to leave them where they were. Now we actually have like a 4-story rack house as opposed to just stuffing stuff in a barn with a forklift. But the main reason we don't really want to move anything around too much is because of the microclimates that we get within a building and how that positively affects the variety of whiskey that we're able to create from this one mash bill. So the two extremes, as an example, I'll use is the two extremes inside of a rickhouse. So not only are we living in Wisconsin that has one of the most volatile climates in the entire world, but also the widest spectrum of temperatures in the entire world. So there's very few places where we experience temperatures that are dropping below -50 and then also reaching 95 to 100 degrees with all levels of humidity in between. There's very few places in the world that have that extreme spectrum. Also, because of that, we have one of the most volatile temperatures in the entire world as well. So what that means, there's a term in the wine industry called diurnal shift, which is the temperature change in a 24-hour period. Most places will experience maybe like a 5 to 10 degree shift from nighttime to daytime. We can have a diurnal shift sometimes of anywhere from 30 to 40 degrees in a day. I mean, there's always, ever since I started making whiskey and studying this, there's a day in March that it snows and it's like -20 degrees, and then the temperature jumps up to like 65. So like that's, sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 40. Sometimes in like a 2-day period, you can jump from 0 degrees up to 60 degrees in like 2 days. That doesn't happen very frequently anywhere else in the world. Then it snows again and you're dropping back down. Then it does the exact same thing in April and it's 85 degrees out, and then it snows in the beginning of May. So this puts a lot of stress on the barrels because as the temperature rises, it expands. The pores in the wood will open up and absorb more liquid and more flavor from the cask. Then when the temperature drops, they squeeze out and constrict like a sponge and extract all that flavor with it. So that's happening throughout the year. Now inside of our rickhouses, you have microclimates depending on where these barrels live. So a barrel that is sitting in the exact center of the rickhouse where it's coolest on the bottom floor, it's very humid, it's very cool, it's very damp. That barrel compared to the barrel on the 4th floor that's sitting right by the window on the south facing side on like the southwest corner is gonna probably have throughout its lifetime a 30-degree temperature shift on an average day. So like if it's, this is a lot more apparent in the summer, but if it's 75 degrees outside, that barrel in the middle is probably gonna read at like 55 to 65 degrees. That barrel on the top southwest corner is probably gonna read like 95, maybe 100 degrees. And as you walk up the stairs, you can feel like a 5-degree temperature shift just going up 4 flights of stairs in our rickhouse. So those barrels are going to have wildly different extractions. They're gonna age a lot differently. That élevage process is gonna be completely unique based off of where they live. And we want to accentuate that with all of our different products. That's why we're able to create so many different varieties of products with just that one mash bill, is because of the temperatures in Wisconsin, because of the temperature difference in our rickhouses. So that's, I know, a very long-winded answer as to why we don't move barrels around.
You get a little size variance on these barrels as well, don't you? Like the size of a bourbon barrel versus the Naranja versus what the Calvados barrels might be.
Yeah, so our regular bourbon casks are standard 53-gallon new charred oak from Independent Stave. We use a 18-month seasoned stave, medium toast, number 3 char. That's like the kind of standard for all of our bourbon. I try and hand select a lot of these Cognac, Armagnac, Calvados barrels, these Vino Naranja casks. I went to Spain, actually found a producer called Cesar Florido that was founded in 1946, ironically, the same year that our farm was purchased. And those happened to be my favorite Vino Naranja casks, so that was really cool. You get a much higher quality. Those barrels are probably 250 to 300 liters. We just got some 100-year-old PX sherry casks from a different producer in Spain that are closer to like 450 liters. So that's like 2.5 times one bourbon cask. All of these different variances will vastly affect kind of the different extractions of these different flavors. So yeah, good question. I think moving on to the Calvados, just because, once again, I know we got a lot to taste tonight. So we have bourbon, rye, and then actual Calvados.
Yeah, the Calvados is in your wine glass. I'll just give a little bit about Calvados so we can get into the whiskey. Oh yeah, absolutely. So Calvados originates up in Normandy, which is a brilliant place to visit if you ever have a chance. Obviously a lot of World War II history there. It's one of the places when traveling abroad I've seen the most American flags, just because, you know, D-Day and all of that. It's a fascinating place, but one of the best things about it is the cider. Like, you go up there, you get a bottle of cider with dinner, and it's this beautiful heirloom, like hundreds of different varietals of heirloom apples that are growing all over the place. They do incredibly beautiful cider. But then Calvados is sort of the distilled version of that beautiful cider. And it's not necessarily as heavy as a brandy. It's a little bit lighter style, which is why I was very curious to see how the finishing, you know, compared to the cognac finishes that we're going to do. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this first, is because it's a little bit more subtle. It's another reason why we're doing it in the wine glass rather than in the whiskey glass. We'll also pour the Tokaji for the very last wine, or the last pairing in your wine glass as well. But basically, distilled cider, it's great for this time of year. Also great if you're doing like champagne cocktails around the holidays. Put a little sugar cubes, some bitters, some Calvados, and some champagne. Always great.
I love the World War II reference, because the last time I went to France, a lot of the Limousin oak is a very sought-after varietal of oak that they use to make barrels, especially in France for winemaking, Cognac, Armagnac, and Calvados. We went to a cooperage that actually was importing a lot, not importing, they're just shipping it down. So the cooperage was in like Bordeaux region, and they were shipping the staves down, and you can't actually like saw Limousin oak because of the I can't remember what it's called. There's a little chemical compound in Limousin oak that you have to actually split it with a high. So they have like a press that splits the oak, as opposed to what we can do with American oak that saws it or mills it. So they're taking these oak trees, they're pressing them in this gigantic like log press, and they find like all this shrapnel from the wood. So like bullets, bomb shrapnel. They had an entire bucket of this stuff from like World War II, because that was such a conflicted area during the war. So they're still pulling that stuff out of the trees, and luckily it doesn't affect the spirit, but it's kind of a unique thing to see, like a whole bucket of World War II bullets and shrapnel coming out of these trees that we're making whiskey out of now. So yeah, Calvados is a really fun spirit. Like I said, with our rye, so the rye for this one was actually the inspiration to get the Calvados barrels, because at the time we had already released Bellafontaine, which is our cognac finished bourbon. We're going to try that next. We had already released our Flamme Reserve. That's our Armagnac finished bourbon. We're going to try that afterwards. And the original idea was like, okay, we got 2 finishes for bourbon. What are the 2 mainstay finishes for our rye lineup going to be as we continue to kind of grow our portfolio? So our rye, like I said, was extremely light and fruity. It had a lot of that, like, there was 2 different major profiles I saw in our rye. It was kind of like the dark chocolate orange or like warm apple pie, cinnamon, apple crisp type thing. So when I classified those, I was like, okay, done. We've got Calvados and Vino Naranja. But then I got the barrels in and I started tasting our bourbon and I was like, oh shit, like this would be really good too if we got some bourbon. So I couldn't decide, so we just filled both of them.
Lucky us.
Lucky us, yeah. So this is a very unique finish for us because, like Pat was saying, Calvados can tend to be on some of the lighter side, but there's also some that are like very intense. I sort of wanted to get both of those, hit both spectrums of that. So most people, when they think of bourbon, that's going to be a little lighter and sweeter compared to like a rye, which is heavier and spicier and darker. I don't want to, everybody's tried these already, right? Like both of them? Okay, cool. I don't want to
No spoilers.
influence anyone's like palate. What I think was really cool with this is the rye, to me, is actually a lot lighter, sweeter, kind of softer of a finish, which you don't really see with ryes ever. And the bourbon is actually the darker, heavier, kind of more intense finish of this. Both of these are like a 5 to 7 year old blend of bourbon and rye. And both of these sat in those Calvados casks for over 2 years, which is also way longer than most people finish anything. I mean, most finishes you see on the market are 4-year-old bourbon with 3 to 4 months of a finish. So this is like realistically almost a 9 or 10 year product. I can't say that on the label, but you know, that's TTB. Not my preference. Which one does everybody like better? It's always a fun. Okay, raise your hand for bourbon. All right, everybody in the
This
front.
corner.
And for rye? Does anybody not like either of them? All right, sweet. Just Pat.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, both hands go up.
Both hands up. No, the Calvados is great. So on the Calvados side, you know, once you take a sip of that Calvados, are you able to kind of see how that carries through? I mean, 2 years is a long time to finish. But, you know, it is,
What's the alcohol?
on the Calvados, typically it's usually a tick or two above fortified wine, but not, it's 40%, so it's kind of like liqueur, almost, is a way to think about it.
Yeah, most, I mean, all of these are going to be about 40, right?
Oh, I think the Armagnac's going to be higher. Or no, actually, no, they're all about 40, yeah. Yep.
So I think stylistically, this is something where we bring a lot of our products over to visit in France, and they're not used to drinking anything as high of alcohol content that what we're used to drinking here in the States. Calvados and Cognac are traditionally bottled at between 35 or 40% alcohol. We don't have anything in our portfolio that's that low. Our lowest product is our 92 proof small batch bourbon. Armagnac is also in that like 40 to 50 range. It's a little more common to find cask strength or barrel proof Armagnacs than it is to find Calvados or Cognac. You actually have to really search pretty hard to find cask strength Calvados because stylistically they are making this in a much more nuanced, softer way than we here make American bourbon. So one really cool technique that we've brought in, and I think we can pour that while I'm talking.
Oh, for the next one?
Yeah.
For the Cognac? Yeah, absolutely.
I just don't want to
Sure.
get too far behind.
All good.
So one technique that's really kind of, when you talk to these cognac chateaus that have been making products for 500, 600, 700, 800 years, close to 1,000 years, they have a lot of techniques that are, well, directly foreign because they make them in a different country, but foreign stylistically as far as how they produce stuff that we've tried to adapt to our American whiskey that we're making here. Two primary examples of that are our use of a slow water reduction and our use of a blending component called petito. So petito means little water in French. Essentially what this is in the Cognac and Argmanac in France, for any of these brandies, they'll actually take some of their older stock, proof it down, and then age it in like 100 hectoliter vat for several decades. It's kind of like a perpetually aging product. They really want this petito, this little water, to be somewhere between 25, it's usually 25% alcohol, let's say, is kind of the target. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher, but for the sake of this explanation, let's say it's 25% alcohol. So now when they have distilled cognac to usually about 160 proof, so 80% alcohol, they'll put stuff in a barrel right at that proof. It'll age in what's called a hot or a dry shay for a couple years. That'll extract all the tannins that it's required of. Then they'll actually physically pump the liquid into what's called a humid or a damp shay. That will be the longer maturation point. So the proof will go up, kind of like we were talking about in my example. We've got that middle barrel in the cool, dark, humid climate. We've got the top barrel in the hot, dry, arid conditions. The proof on the top one is gonna spike up and you're gonna extract a lot more tannins. The proof in the bottom one is gonna go down and you're gonna extract a lot more wood sugars and esters. So two wildly different flavor extractives. In France, instead of doing this, they just have two separate rick houses. One that's gonna spike proof and extract tannins, and then one that's gonna soften the product, lower proof naturally, oxidize those tannins out, and extract wood sugars from the cask. So they'll put it in the dry shay, spike the proof, move the liquid to the damp shay or the wet shay. Shay is just rickhouse in French. Then the proof will naturally decrease over time. They can also add like a little bit of water to kind of bring that proof down. So most cognacs, I mean, they have VS, VSOP, XO, all the different levels. For anything that is like 15 years old, that's usually sat in a dry shay for about 2 to 3 years and then lives its whole life in this damp, cool condition where the proof is naturally dropping down year over year over year. So that when they're finally ready to bottle, the proof has naturally gone from like 70% alcohol to really close to 40% alcohol. Then they'll use this little blending component. This is kind of like a secret trick. This petito, and they'll slowly introduce this petito to the actual cask before it's ready to get bottled. So they'll add this 25% petito, which is essentially proofed down cognac that's been living in this massive vat and creating its own unique flavor profile. They'll introduce this in very small amounts, measure the proof down, and then get it as close to your final bottling proof of 40% alcohol as possible without ever adding any water. So this is a very interesting concept because when we're talking about proofing in the United States, which is the act of adding water to create a consistent flavor profile and alcohol content, when we're doing that, we're taking massive batches of barrels, blending them all together into a huge tank, and then adding all the water that you need right at once, right before you send it to the bottling and packaging line. So what that does is, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, this is a much more nuanced and I think elevated technique, is you're shocking the spirit, you're not giving it time to adjust, and you're also proofing down with two very extreme ends of your spectrum. So like bourbon, if it's 120 or 130 proof bourbon, and you're proofing it down with 0 proof water, that's kind of a lot of distance to cover to get to like 45, which is a pretty 45% alcohol, which is a pretty standard alcohol content for bourbon. Now, what we're doing, we have our own Petito that's usually 5-year-old bourbon that we proof down to about 25% alcohol. We age that in used bourbon casks for another 3, 4, 5, 6. The oldest stuff we have is actually been in a Petito cask for about 8 years. So technically it's like 13-year-old, but once again, the TTB won't let me say that anywhere. So now you have 25, 30% alcohol, and you have 120, so 60% alcohol. You're a lot closer to meeting in the middle. So you don't shock the spirit as much. Plus, when we're proofing these finishing casks, we're introducing that in a very slow manner. So maybe 1 or 2 gallons every week over the course of 6 months. It's a lot more labor intensive, but what it does is really soften the finish out. It adds a lot more depth and complexity. You're introducing a unique flavor into the whiskey because water is flavorless and odorless. Petito actually has its own really cool flavor profile that you're layering into this final product. So I find that really exciting when we talk about our French kind of heritage, if you will, and our French portfolio, because not anybody that I know in the American whiskey world is doing that type of stuff.
This is the front is the cognac here. Yeah. So this is Maison Ferrand. They're a very well-known cognac house. I think, do you use Tesseron barrels? Is that what you said? Or
Some Tesseron.
okay. Tesseron is a very famous cognac house. It's one that we have to get basically directly from the Bordeaux plots, and we do occasionally buy it directly. I wasn't able to get any for this. I did try. We're about a week. It's about a week out, basically, so we will have some for the holidays. But Maison Ferrand, so Cognac and Armagnac are essentially adjacent areas, right? And so the Cognac side of things, it's a little bit farther to the west, had a little bit more access to the global market, and so it became a little bit more of a commodity before Armagnac did. And so typically Cognac's going to be a little softer. I think Cognac is usually made in a pot still, whereas Armagnac is usually made in a column still. So typically Armagnac is a little hotter coming off of the still, so it takes a little bit more time to calm down. So with Cognac, you'll typically see aging start around 4 or so years, and then you get up to 10, 15 for like XO and all of that. But with Armagnac, you typically see at least 10 years, sometimes up to 25. We had a 50-year-old Armagnac on the shelf. I think we're bringing some more in for the holidays. But Armagnac can age for a long time and kind of let it chill out. So that's the main difference between Cognac and Armagnac. Essentially, it's a different place and a slightly different approach to the production.
Yeah, like 80 to 90% of France's cognac gets exported, and like 80 to 90% of France's Armagnac stays within the country. So, yeah. And then like no Calvados ever leaves France. So Nancy, my mentor, she trained with Hubert Robin from Germain Robin in Southern California. He was the youngest son of an 11th generation cognac distillery. So all that really means is his older brothers inherited everything and he didn't get anything. So he had to, he chose to move to California and start this French-style American brandy company called Germain Robin, and then I think just sold to Pernod Ricard for like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So she started working for him, learning some of these traditional French blending techniques. And then Nancy kind of went off on her own and started to consult with other whiskey brands using some of these kind of French-inspired techniques. So this is her joke, not mine. I've adopted it. I think it's still really funny. But cognac, stylistically, is made in a very elegant, soft, refined way. So cognac, Armagnac, on the other hand, is, to Pat's point, a little more rustic. The equipment they use is a lot older. The product itself is a little more rugged. So when Nancy talks about cognac versus Armagnac, cognac is like the date that is the aristocrat's daughter that you would take to the ball, go to a really nice dinner afterwards, and make sure you get her home by 10 o'clock because she's like a politician's daughter or something. Then you call up her wild gypsy cousin, Armagnac, who grew up on a farm, parties until 4 o'clock in the morning, and you go and drink Armagnac out in a field around a bonfire until like 3 a.m. So, yeah.
Is that tonight?
We'll see.
It's good firewood.
So the Bellafontaine, our cognac finished bourbon, that was named after my family's original family farm in southwestern Wisconsin near Basco, called Bellafontaine Farms. When my great-grandparents came here from southeastern France, they named it after their little artisanal spring that was on the property. So Bellafontaine just means beautiful fountain farms in French, Bellafontaine Farms. So that was kind of our first effort in tying our French heritage, plus all of Nancy's knowledge in this French blending technique, to our Wisconsin whiskey. Then a few years later, we actually took a trip to Armagnac with Nancy and some of her other clients to really learn like more hands-on approach of what these folks have been doing so well for these hundreds of thousands of years. Then we go to Armagnac, and there's a couple things why we named this La Flamme Reserve, and it's not because it's hot or it's spicy or it's fiery. There's actually some really cool significance to this name and the history behind this product. So the way that an Armagnac still functions is most of these small family farms don't actually own their own distilling equipment. They're small family wineries, and they'll produce all the wine that they want over the years. And then in the harvest season, once they finish making all of their wine, they'll probably set aside like 20 to 30% of their wine harvest that's going to be distilled into Armagnac. So they'll say, okay, we're ready to start distilling Armagnac. We've finished our grape harvest and we've made all of our wine. They'll call up a master distiller who will actually bring a Armagnac still by. They hook it up to like the back of a trailer, and you drive it around with a pickup truck. I don't have any graphics for this, but everybody's got phones. I urge you to look up like a traditional alembic Armagnac still, and just take a look at these things because they literally just drive them around the countryside. The way that they actually work is still using a wood-burning heat source, and they actually use the wine as the coolant to reconstitute the distilled spirit back into a liquid. So the way that they're designed, once you start the flame of the Armagnac still and have it plugged into your wine source, you can't actually shut it off until you've finished distilling all of your wine, because it's kind of like a hybrid of like a column still within a pot still. It's really, really unique. So La Flamme de l'Armagnac is actually a festival that they have in the Armagnac region of France every year, kind of around this time actually. When they finish the wine harvest, their distiller shows up and they start the fire, the flame of the Armagnac still, to celebrate the end of harvest and the beginning of their distillation season of Armagnac, which is only about 6 months. It's like the end of October through the end of March is the only time you can actually distill Armagnac in France. So La Flamme de l'Armagnac is to signify the start of that flame, the big party that my family was able to attend, and meet a lot of these traditional Armagnac producers, and really to signify the end of harvest and the beginning of another really cool season.
Is that because of the outside temperature?
It's really just, that's how they can ensure that nobody's using grapes from other regions.
Gotcha.
And I think it's more of just like a protection against like outside sources trying to come in and make it way too commercialized.
Old school intellectual property.
Yeah.
Yeah, very French, not very Italian.
No. Exactly. So yeah, it's kind of wild because you know, you go over there and they're, you know, you go in April or May and all the stills are shut down. They're just not making anything. And I really think I asked that question and it was kind of like, oh, it's just the way that we've always done it, like very traditional French. But I think it's really because if they could distill all year, then you could import grapes from other regions and still call it like Cognac or Armagnac. But this kind of ensures that they're only producing the varietals of grapes that grow in that region that are also kind of protected by the denominations. And it really kind of insulates the quality of those products.
How much
Good
of the
question.
year? How much of the year do you have stills running to produce J. Henry?
All year.
All year.
Yeah, all year.
The Armagnac, yeah.
And everybody's kind of working their way.
So this is Delord Armagnac. So this is one of our favorite producers. So this is what's called Napoleon Armagnac. So you will see that on a lot of different from a lot of different producers. It usually means at least 10 years old, although there's some fungibility there. But typically a Napoleon is the bottle that the producer feels is best indicative of the house style that they want. So typically it will be the one that they feel sort of best represents them as a house, even if it isn't necessarily the oldest one that they produce. Because the longer something sits in a barrel, you know, the more it tastes like the barrel, and some people really like that. And you know, but it might not exactly be the style that they want to do. We do have a 25-year on the shelf from Delord, which I think we have for like $65. So if you like old spirits, Armagnac is a great bang for your buck, because you can find 25-year-old stuff for right around that $60, $70 price point, which is kind of absurd, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Good luck doing that with bourbon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it's a really fun category. I think, you know, Cognac sort of gets the hype and has the sort of the name recognition with Hennessy and all of those. Armagnac very much still under the radar. You know, it always sort of feels like it's going to break through, but never quite does. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if any of you watched The Sopranos, but there was that plot line where the restaurant owner was going to import the next vodka, and he was trying to sell Tony on investing in it. It was Armagnac that he was talking about. Because, of course, this is going to take the place of vodka very easily. But it hasn't quite gotten over that hump yet, but it is still, so if you're looking for a value, still a really good play there.
And also, don't tell anybody that, because then it will come over the hump. And
Yeah.
then it won't be as available.
No, exactly.
So
Just,
everybody in this room, it'll be our little
yeah,
secret.
just between us. Right. So next I'm going to come around with a very special bottle that I wish I could sell to you tonight. Unfortunately, because of the government shutdown, the label has not yet been approved. So we can't actually have it in the store. I do have a sample bottle of it, though. I
Meticulously labeled.
meticulously labeled,
It's the ringer.
clearly approved by the federal government.
We worked a lot on that label. It's very.
Yeah.
We worked-
It's beautiful.
Had to find a pen.
So this is Tokai finish here. So Tokai is a dessert wine that comes from Hungary. It's one of the oldest dessert wines in the world. So there's a couple of ways that you can make a dessert wine that's a little bit sweeter. The easiest way is to add sugar, but that's no fun and a little boring. So what they do in Hungary is they actually let the grapes start to rot a little bit on the vine, which sounds disgusting, but it's botrytis, which is called noble rot. And so what that does is it's actually a fungus that, because the grapes are often engulfed in fog and there's some moisture in the vineyard, sort of occurs naturally on the grapes. You let that fungus infect the bunches of grapes, and it will actually pierce the skin of the grape, and so it'll start to dry out the grape, which concentrates the sugar. And so when you press a grape that then, Sauterne, and there's other wines dessert wines throughout the world that use a similar process, but it's that drying and that concentration of sugar that allows for that sweetness. It also means there's less juice available because that moisture is being absorbed, so you don't get as much juice when you're pressing it, which is why most dessert wines come in a small bottle like this and are relatively expensive compared to other wines in a similar size, just because you have to have so many more grapes to get a bottle. This is Royal Tokai, which I think you said was the barrel that you used for the finishing. So there's various aging that they then do once they get that pressed sweeter juice. They'll blend it in with a still wine, and then they'll age it for usually around at least 5 years. This is a blend of some 5-year, 7-year-ish age, but you can get longer aging on this, and it does get expensive pretty quickly. But I think this is a great example of what Tokai is, and hopefully you'll be able to have kind of see the carry through. We're the only account in Wisconsin that is getting any of the Tokai finish. We're very happy about that. I think the rest is going to a restaurant group in Chicago, something like that. So we're incredibly pleased. And it will be in at some point. We've got a great price on it tonight, so if you do want to pre-order it, you can do that tonight. We'll ring you up tonight and we'll let you know when it's here, which hopefully should only be another couple weeks or so.
It's ready.
It is, yeah, it's good to go.
Talk to your senator.
Seriously.
Yeah.
You don't understand, we need.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, you're right.
There's 2 to 3 to
You get 2.
4, 5,
Do you want them?
Pat.
Is that the
Pat, do you know how many bottles you're getting?
I mean, I think we're getting the whole barrel, so it's gonna be a fair
A
amount.
couple hundred?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Just
probably
under?
like 150 or so.
But across the
You can just show people.
Across the stores, yeah.
Or if you want, while he's pouring, you can show everyone the label.
Yeah, you should definitely
Yeah.
grab one for Clark's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what the label is.
We live 3 minutes away.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Very soon.
With the label or the TTB?
So,
Oh.
it reminds me of Red River.
I
Calvados
tried
review.
to
He had the same handwritten label on the bottle. And this is absolutely the Calvados finish. We just haven't actually printed this yet or picked a final proof.
Is this the same Tokai that we had a taste of at the farm? Probably about.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think when that was.
Yeah, that's it. So we were originally, we weren't considering. We were actually going to do it ourselves, but then we have such a great partnership with them. We'll let them have it. So yeah, because it ended up being on one situations where obviously we could have done it ourselves, or at Rutgers, and there's such a good partnership, and they've done it. So we ended up letting them have the water. And yeah, so obviously it's RPMs. Yeah, like RPM has theirs, but since it's different bottlings and actually different barrels, it's
Slightly different.
like I said, it's like I think it's in a similar vein, but I can totally like there's definitely a difference, and I don't know if it's like how long they sat in or just the difference in barrels, because we got the RPM barrels from RPM, the Tokai rep, whereas this one we actually met Charlie. He's the Tokai rep when we went to Ireland for our friend Steven's. He works for Bohan Distillery, and they did a grand opening, and so he was actually there. So we actually met the Tokai rep there, and we actually got these barrels directly. So the RPM ones were given to us from RPM because from their project, whereas these came directly. So I think there's also like a difference in maybe how old they were, or how they came in. But there's definitely a huge difference for sure. So that's why I like is that it was definitely a difference in like the finish.
Should have brought the chocolate orange.
I know, and I had.
I was looking at you and I was going, chocolate orange.
And so it was really so that's what's funny is I had them because I had them in a bag. When we went up to Lodge Cooler, and I should have just left them in the car. But now ever since the Reserva released and it was so hot, I
Melted the
I exactly. Even though it's been cold, I didn't trust it, so I literally brought the bag back inside the house because I'm like, I just never know.
Risk this many oranges.
Yeah, and it was funny because we had it at Lodge Kohler, and what's funny is I brought up there thinking, because we had a couple VIP tastings, they didn't even do the Reserva, because sometimes I know what they're going to pour out, sometimes I don't. But then I did run into, like I said, Tom Wells. He was there, and he was like showing me a picture of he made some paella and a picture of the Reserva. I was like, and he's like, I actually have to live in my room, and it was funny because he was in room 103 and I was in room 101. I was like, it sounds weird. I'm like, come down to my room with me. No. So I gave him some of the chocolate orange. Because he has them in his room. I'm like, you and Mary are gonna love this. So yeah, and so it was just funny. So I'm like, I'm glad somebody at least took one box because I was like, I would have brought all the boxes with me. So good. No, and I had, and again, I'm like, it would have already been sitting in the car. I would have brought him in for this. So. It's funny because you said that because when I saw them, like,
I took a sip of it, I was like, oh, I need an orange.
I know, it's almost become a Pavlov response where, like, I literally, I almost need the cherry chocolate orange.
Well, especially with you sitting there, like,
I know.
if I was at home, it probably might not come
Yeah.
like if you sitting there.
Would you say like the clouds, kind of like the reputation?
I think
Because this is such a sought
chocolate orange
after
is one of the
variety in and of
patent
itself.
road
They
plates.
sell everything.
Oh, yeah.
She emailed me because I hadn't signed up for the next
Do you have a limit on the Tokai?
Nope. She's like, hey,
They don't have
by the
the
way, I'm
sales.
like, yeah.
Did you have a chance to get in the,
Oh yeah, and they're actually gonna
I've been
do
working on it. It hasn't
and we have the they call it the Point Ones. It's like a Boston Course event. And it's for the it's cool because we're going to use it as one of the patent road blends too. So that's gonna be fun. And it sounds like a great blend. So I give it a
A
try.
lot of series of
Plus the game
fortunate
with all the
events,
dog
if you
tag.
will, that cause
Yeah.
and kind of come about this. I'm really excited because first of all, you don't rarely ever see this wine in the States. If you do, it's at really expensive restaurants in New York, LA, Miami, or Chicago.
That nose is
Sometimes you see it
fantastic.
in like Dallas, because they don't need to sell it anywhere else.
My.
So the fact that he's able to
wanna dive in there.
into Wisconsin is really cool.
I just love how different. Even though, like I said, it's like there's
Yeah,
both
throw
Tokai
the
benches.
mask.
They
Throw the
rarely
mask
ever
off. Don't give
They're so different. They're so different.
So
This is why there is as many Starlight bottles on my wall as
The
there are.
whiskey that's in the, we can do this.
when he was still at Cadre?
Wait, still at Padre?
Oh, he's still there? Oh, okay. No, that's what I said. So, wait. I think you said he's still there. Okay. No,
They left like 3 months
No,
ago.
Oh, okay.
I didn't realize he left.
Oh no.
He hates his new job, but they're hazing the new guys.
Yeah.
Just a little more detail about, because I forget the aging on this.
Grocery stores
So if we're almost at the end, but I just for my own. So what happened when we had the opportunity to pick this barrel was essentially I said yes before they had an opportunity to tell me anything about it, and I was just so happy that we were getting it that I've forgotten most of the details about this
Yes.
in terms of the aging or anything like that. So if you could talk a little bit about that and refresh my memory.
Yeah. So this is like I was telling this table. A lot of very lucky and fortunate circumstances had to come together for this to actually happen. Everything else that we have is influenced kind of by like an experience that I've had, or sort of the French tradition and our French heritage, or Nancy's influence, or something. So they were like, well, why did you do Tokai? Like, what's the point? So this winery, a lot of people don't understand how exclusive not only Tokai is globally, but Royal Tokai in and of itself. It's nicknamed the Wine of Kings by Louis XIII. So this is like his preferred wine. That's how long Royal Tokai has been around. You will very rarely find this anywhere in the United States or anywhere globally, especially because Royal Tokai has such a kind of prestigious reputation across the globe. They don't have sales reps. They have one guy, his name's Charlie. He's the global brand ambassador for Royal Tokai. Yeah, Charlie, I forget his last name, but he's a funny guy. He's actually British. So Charlie essentially gets to pick and choose most places that actually get any of this product. They sell out of this anywhere from 3 to 5 years in advance most of the time. I think botrytis only hits these grapes every other year for some reason in Hungary.
That's about right, yeah. I mean, it comes out to about every other year.
Every other year.
Yeah.
So not only do you have such a small production region in Hungary, not very well known except like by the upper echelons of wine snobs. You only can produce small volumes of this because the grapes get so concentrated, and it kind of decreases your yields by over 50%. You really only harvest like 30 to 40% of what you would on a normal grape, and it only happens every other year. So all these things factor into, this is one of the most exclusive wines in the entire world. Plus, it's one of the most sought after wines because it's so, I mean, you've tasted it, like, what does everybody think? It's one of the most fantastic products of anything that I've ever tried, because it's a sweet dessert wine, but it's not like cloying. It's not oppressive, it's like elegant, it's very refined. It's one of the most beautiful things in the entire world. So like a couple of things happened for this to happen. So the first way that this came about was there's a steakhouse down in Chicago that's a pretty prestigious location downtown. They actually bought an entire single barrel of this wine, which, I mean, I don't know what you're selling.
It's never done. I mean, that is something that just is not done. It's the first time I've ever heard of even a large restaurant group doing something like that.
Yeah. So, like, can I say anything about that?
If you want, yeah, go for it.
So
Yeah, no,
the
absolutely.
restaurant group is Let Us Entertain You, which is one of the biggest, like, high-end restaurant chains in the entire world. They had to fight this company for years to get a barrel of this wine. So that happened. I have a good relationship with the beverage director of that restaurant, and so the barrel itself is 350 liters, I believe. you've got a crazy good price on this right now.
Yeah.
So take advantage of that, everybody. Usually you can't buy this small bottle for less than $100. So think about 375 milliliters at $100 a bottle. You have 350 liters. You can do the math because I'm not great at that. That's how much they had to spend just to get this wine. They shipped the barrel over, and we were very fortunate to do a collaboration and finish our bourbon in that Royal Tokai barrel. So I called, and I was like, hey, we already have one of these casks. Like, can you send me another one? And nobody ever called me back. They just don't care. I talked to Mike, the GM of this restaurant group, and he's like, dude, no, they're not going to sell you another one. They don't even know who you are. So I tried to send him product. I tried to do everything. I was like, this is really good. Like, I'm treating your product with respect. This is so, like, this could be a cool partnership. And so nothing happens for like another year. And then I'm really good friends with another guy who works in the industry. He works for an Irish whiskey company in Dublin. We met in Chicago. We maintained friendship, even though he lives in Dublin now. His company that he works for is the national international sales manager. He invited us to their family's new distillery opening up about, was that like 3 years ago now?
No, it's about two years ago,
So
yeah.
2 years ago. And for some reason, they have been trying to do the same thing as me in getting these Tokai casks. I mean, everybody in the world is trying to do this. So they got a couple. They invited Charlie to the distillery opening in Dublin. He happened to be in the UK, so he was like, okay, if you pay for my flight and put me up in a room and pay for all my meals, I guess I'll come and check out your silly little distillery in Ireland. Yeah. So luckily, Charlie was staying in our hotel, and we got hammered with him all 3 nights, went to a really dodgy disco party, and then he invited us to Hungary because he was like, dude, why didn't you call me? I was like, well, I tried. I didn't know who you were, Charlie. So long story short, now we don't have unlimited access to these barrels, but he's more willing to like shave a couple off, which was very serendipitous.
Yes.
And so that's how this product happened, which is extremely cool.
Cheers. No, fantastic. And, you know, like anything else, it's all about relationships. And, you know, that's a really important thing for us as Waterford. It's why we want to forge these partnerships with great producers in Wisconsin. When I took over the spirits program at Waterford before I was director of education, when I joined Waterford a few years ago, I really wanted to focus on local and farm-to-bottle spirits. And J. Henry fits that ethos like a glove. And I'm so happy that this came to be. You know, we were able to do our first barrel pick with them this year, and that was our first one that we tasted. So I'm really looking forward to continuing a fruitful partnership and you know, continuing to support each other. And thank you, Joe, so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Many of you have probably found the order sheet underneath the flight map tonight. Oh yeah.
One cognac.
We do have a few bottles of everything in stock. So hopefully we'll be able to send you home with something tonight. I think I see some pens back here, so Joe might be willing to sign some bottles.
Yeah, 2 of them.
That's really fun.
And so yeah, we'll try to get everybody at least a bottle of something. But everything else, so the Tokai, if you want some bottles of that, we do have a few in stock. We'll be able to get those next week. Everything else we should be able to have by Friday. So just fill out your sheet. You don't need to fill out your credit card information or anything at the bottom unless you want me to go on a vacation to Mexico on your credit card, which would be perfect. This is the sheet we use for larger events where we just have people turn things in, but we'll ring you out before you leave tonight. Just put contact information on there, so either a phone number or an email, so we can let you know when everything's here. As I mentioned, we have some really cool upcoming events. We have Vintage Champagne on Thursday, which is always a fun one. We're doing Napa Valley a week from Thursday, and then next Tuesday it is an incredibly exciting seminar that we put together. So Carl Galko is a colleague of ours here. He's lived and worked around the world. He's actually the only person that works here that's actually worked a harvest. And so he's put together, we affectionately called it Wines You Might Hate, featuring Carl.